Welcome to the Plasm podcast, where teachers and researchers come together to make knowledge, together. Each episode offers thought-provoking nuggets of autism research to support the Pan-London Autism Schools network as they meet at UCL. I'm Brian, and today I'm joined by Daniel Williams. Daniel is a PhD student and assistant head teacher at, I got this wrong earlier, the Eagle Park. I called it the Eagle Claw School, which is so much cooler. So, Daniel, you presented at the last Plasm. Could you just give us a little overview, your elevator pitch?
Yes. So I'm really interested in sensory processing, specifically in autistic children. So at this moment in time, I'm running a longitudinal investigation.
Okay, I've got two questions already. So, perceptual processing. Tell us what perceptual processing is.
So when we're born, we take in huge. We're not born doing lots of things. We're not born talking. We're not born walking or running. All of these behaviors are learnt, and how we learn these behaviors.
Can we say, or at least I will say, babies are pretty useless humans to start with.
Yeah.
They need an awful lot. So from this little squishy mess, what do they become next?
Yeah, so children and infants take in huge amounts of sensory data, so information from the environment, such as through their senses, such as touch, smell, taste, and all of these things then have to be then processed, and then these build into the learnt behaviors. Babies flail their arms, and from that create motor actions or motor ways to do other tasks. They start to flail, then they start to move their arms more consistently, and then we get more directional actions, so the reaching, grabbing movements. So all of the behaviors that it seems natural for us are learnt behaviors for humans.
So they don't just suck their own toes because they taste good. They suck their own toes to learn where their body is.
Yes.
Excellent. So that was the first bit. The second bit, you then mentioned longitudinal studies.
Yes.
Drum roll, please.
So a longitudinal study is a piece of work that starts off with the same group of children from year one and tracks the same group of children as they move through their various ages. So we are starting at year one when children first enter schooling, and we're going to track them all the way throughout their primary school education.
Amazing. So it keeps the same child all the way through. So if there is a baby or toddler that sucks their toes, you'll end up with a teenager that sucks their toes as well. That just sounds strange, but it's looking at the difference and why they don't anymore.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in why there are individual differences, and we know from extensive studies that there are motor differences between an autistic individual and a non-autistic individual.
You've got the predominant neurotype, and there are ways that they sense their own body. And there's a difference in the autistic way of sensing their bodies, which means that, we know that quite a few autistic folk end up as Olympic athletes. And so that this isn't just necessarily a deficit model. There is a difference model that can actually end up with greater ways of doing it.
Yes. And then from that, we know that children entering the education system that tend to be able to use their limbs in more profound ways tend to do better academically. Now, you can imagine if you're more likely to pick up a pencil and start writing, you're more likely to take better notes in class. If you're more likely to engage in school materials and educational materials, you're more likely to learn those educational materials.
I will tell you one of the big problems I had at school. Books. It seems a fairly easy technology. You open them up. If you lie down and try and read a book, you drop it on your face.
Yeah.
And now, I'm getting older. Don't doom scroll in bed, people. But when you fall asleep and you drop your phone on. If I wasn't interested in the physicality of books, I wouldn't actually got more and more into books.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm really specifically interested in, the ability for children to pick up or use educational equipment or educational resources and how that affects their academic achievements. We know from studies that this very much can be predictive of how well they do academically.
Okay, here's one to chuck in there. I loved me when I was a kid. I love that feeling that when you press a calculator button, and I would just sort of sit there and pressing stuff, and that migrated onto pressing keyboards and that kind of stuff. And I do like myself a bit of tech now. What I miss on touchscreens is that little feedback. And then, a lot of, I wouldn't say success, lots of my geekery is involved in using IT stuff. I like the feedback of our tech. So I'm loving this embodiment, the sort of somatic, there's a good word.
Yeah.
Could you give the lovely people here, could you give them a idea of what a somatic response is?
Well, so it would be, so when you're touching and you're feeling that sort of sensation in your fingertips and being able to then direct yourself towards the key, as we're using this analogy, and being able to target that key, that would be that response.
They're not floating brains in a jar.
No.
We have these bodies that feed everything back to us, and we live in these lovely little cycles of creating our own meaning from the world by reaching out. Isn't that just a beautiful thing? So tell me again what the subject is. We'll come back to that.
So, well, no, I was gonna carry on. So,
Go.
so if you as a child, you loved the sensation of looking at keys, touching keys, and that's migrated towards computing and being really good at computing.
I'm not really good. I'm a geek. I break things well.
So yeah, but you build your confidence with the calculator, and as you progress throughout your life, your confidence then build, and
That was
became
Daniel's
more
way of saying that
confidence.
I look old.
But you build your confidence to more complex objects. So where then I specifically have looked at the raw data that I'm taking through lots of individuals, I'm then interested in, what are the other factors that mediate, or what other factors draw in to make children better or worse or different when they're using their motor skills. And this doesn't have to be, huge differences between non-autistic and autistic individuals. This is individual differences. What makes a person more likely to pick up that pencil and have a go? So then now we're bringing in, well, is confidence a factor in a child's ability to believe in themselves and believe that they can pick up the pencil, or can run, or can walk, or all these other skills that feel so natural and so involuntary?
And this is the bit I really love about your research. Yes, it is about physicality, but it's also about the confidence, who we are as people and how we develop because of the confidences that we gain. And is confidence itself a built-in measure, or is it something that can be developed?
So, well, we know from research it's definitely something that we can increase, and usually practice increases confidence, and that tends to be the driving factor for you wanting to practice the skills more.
Can I ask what makes people want to practice? This is just because I hated playing the piano as a child.
I mean, there's a whole host of factors that can make people want to engage with lots of topics, and there's huge studies available that show that engagement and the sense of liking and feeling confident about yourself in your own body makes you want to practice more, makes you want to do things more. And if we then take this to an academic approach, well, if you like doing computing, or like doing touching keys, or if you like writing novels, then you're more likely to practice your handwriting. You're more likely to practice these fundamental skills that our society greatly values, such as reading, such as handwriting, typing. Lots of these skills they're highly valued in our society, even if it's second nature to us.
It is. It's how do we create environments where children love doing these things and continue doing these things and feel well about themselves from doing these things. These build beautiful little feedback loops where they settle into themselves as learners. So Give me a bit more specifics about your research.
Sure. So, well, with taking confidence, if we look at the understanding on how do we assess
Yes.
a child's confidence, what we're using is something called the PMSE, or the Pictorial Scale of Motor Confidence. And what this is,
What were these, the pictures you showed us at Glasson
yes,
with the lovely sort of bean-shaped people doing bean-shaped things?
yes. So because lots of children don't have lots of communication skills, they're still developing those. So what we are doing is we're presenting children with models of what a good motor action looks like, or what a poor motor action looks like, and we're asking them to look at two pictures, and we're asking them to evaluate, well, which picture looks more like them. And then that breaks down into further questioning.
You know, with this PMSC, you must create one for me, which has a bean figure running and a bean figure sitting on the sofa playing Stardew Valley. And I'll know exactly where I am on that one.
But then that breaks down into, well, do you feel like you're extremely good at this, or do you feel like you're good at this, or okay at this, or do you really not feel that this is an activity for you?
So this is a scale that's already been created.
Yes.
What do we know about the scale?
Sure. So this comes from a researcher called Barnett in Australia, and she has validated this. This is a standardized scale, so it's been validated mainly in typical developing children. So children were asked to look at pictures and asked just to describe what's happening in those pictures. Then they were asked to perform the PMSE, and then a week later they were then asked to reevaluate, to do the PMSE again, which would then show the researchers if what they were saying the first time was also correct the second time.
So if they thought they were a good jumper first time, a week later they'd still think they were a good jumper.
Yes. And that was done over many participants, and then we have the final version of PMSE scales, which have object control, which is about your ability to pick up a ball, throw a ball, and those things, and then something called motor, which is more about your ability to move in space, so running, jumping, skipping.
So we know that this scale works for the majority of pupils. I say pupils, what sort of age group was it used on?
It's been validated throughout childhood and adolescence.
Adolescence. So we know that that works for the majority neurotype. How can we be confident that this is a good way of approaching autistic students?
Sure. It's, as I've mentioned before, it's difficult for 5-year-olds to communicate exactly what they mean.
Because they're 5-year-olds. Have you met a 5-year-old? How do you physically move? I physically move like Optimus Prime. That was my childhood. I want to become a lorry.
But we know that in autistic pupils that the communication difficulties can last further on into childhood. So what we are currently doing is we're going to be looking at multiple time points and seeing if there is a relationship between those time points. We're also,
so time points, are we talking months, years, weeks, hours?
We're talking years. We would expect that as children age, we tend to do more complex motor skills. You would expect motor skills to improve, and you would also expect confidence to improve. But you would assume that there is some correlation between their confidence measures. We're also then looking at the possibility of how would we confirm that children understood the question non-verbally, because this is a internal measure, as in someone has to seek inside themselves, and then there's no right answer. We're looking at how do we then model those actions? How do we then ask someone that has difficulties in speaking, how do they model those actions and show us that they understand the questionnaire? Because what we normally see is children are extremely poor at telling how confident they are, but that is actually a real positive, because they're really poor at telling researchers how good they are at an activity or a sport. They tend to very much overestimate themselves. They're brilliant at everything, and we had that all the time. That's actually seen as positive things, because as I was saying about practice, they tend to practice more. So
because they are saying that they are confident,
yeah,
they're more likely to continue practice. even if they're not actually very good at it in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah, this does explain why when I'm sitting in a primary school playground and kids are running around and you say, "Are you great at the ball?" Everybody goes, "Yeah," and then piles in the worst game of football I've seen in a long, long time. So
Yeah.
there is, I think, something about that that's beautiful. Do we use the word overconfidence?
I don't think children. Yeah, I mean, we can be overconfident.
No,
I
but
don't think that's bad.
there is that beautiful way of learning by creating spaces in which excitement is valued.
Mm.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And so when we want to look at if there is differences in confidence between autistic and non-autistic children, and then we also want to be able to know that they understood the questions that we're presenting them with. So we're actually evaluating systems with teachers and using the Plazanar network to, uh, I myself am a teacher, but I want lots of teachers to feed into how we can evaluate non-verbal students, because what this research is supposed to be is including everyone. And what we don't want specific groups of autistic students that are good at communicating or have an ability to communicate being the ones that we take and study. We want to study the whole
I
population.
think that's a really important point because non-speaking autistic folk can still be very confident in the way that they move.
Mm.
And it's how we link these things together. And maybe it is I don't want to say pitfall of assessment itself, but you're creating this assessment tool, but that isn't, my hunch is that it's not the be all and end all. Assessment is a way for teachers to create these beautiful spaces.
Yeah, and if the research does show that confidence does improve motor skills and allows students to better use school materials, well, that's a great feedback to teachers, because then teachers can then go back and then evaluate their lessons and bring that confidence aspect into it's then necessary for children to practice more automated skills.
It's that first step. You're creating those beautiful little loops that create confidence and drive and allow folk to flourish.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's brilliant stuff. So we've talked about the sort of scheme of it. Before we wrap up, quick question for you. You're a teacher and a researcher yourself. What has your research taken into the classroom of late? And it could be just a paper that you read, or it could be something that you're doing yourself. How's that going back to the Eagle score?
Well, I mean, it's that drive towards more interesting and more engaging lessons for individuals. Like, as I speak to my teachers, I hope that we're thinking outside the box more. We're using more equipment. We're buying in more equipment in order to make those links, make the mechanical tasks feel, for want of a better word, exciting. Not feel like lessons, and make children want to come to school. These things are exciting, and it's not just confidence; it's the whole sort of a holistic approach to
You said one of my key words.
to education,
Right.
and part of that is children wanting to engage in school materials, and that's a real key thing for me. Is that I want all the students that come to my school to want to engage within the materials. It's not there is learning, academic and cognitive things that do go on, but that doesn't mean that we take away the fun.
No, indeed. And I think that is a beautiful note to end it on. Daniel, thank you ever so much. You have been an absolute joy.